everyone, and welcome to another installment of TED Excellence, the show in which I always try to find out where are my boundaries. And I come to you live from my Corona bunker on the moon. The Dogcat Fox, a Pepperjack, and all of you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. Tempestuous Thursday. Yes, the end of the week for those of us in the States who have tomorrow off for Veterans Day. And thank you to all of our veterans. I have veterans in my family, and even though it has become somewhat cliche to say so, I mean it sincerely. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. But all that being said, what are we here for today? Well, as you may know, longtime viewers, I had a series of videos I did for a couple of years. There's a playlist on my channel called Expatriate Games, where I took a look at various exposés or news articles or videos talking about situations on the border regarding immigration, legal and illegal, and other such, matters. And in the last couple of months, I've done a monthly sort of Reader's Digest of articles covering events at the border regarding the immigration crisis and illegal entries and border patrol captures and things like that. It's always been a subject that's fascinated me for the last several years. And so it was on my mind recently because we just had our elections in the United States, the primary elections. And one of the subjects that came up in a couple of races I was taking a look at various points was the situation at the border. And so this week, when TEDx did their weekly dump of videos, I came across this one. Credible Fear, Stories of Asylum Seekers Coming to the U.S. It sounds fairly serious. Sounds possibly just a series of tales. But I'll explain why I'm curious about this one and also why I have this informational card up before I get to the video. But who's joining me this evening after all that preamble? Jaeger Pony, hello. Matt Barnes, hello. Shell D, hello. Keeverdam, hello. Mike R, hello. Attack Alpaca, hello. JMK, hello. Bridget, hello. Robert Pincus, hello. Jonathan Peterson, hello. Who else is here? Is that everybody I see? That's everybody I see? Oh, Megan Ring, hello. I'll do some more hellos as people appear, I suppose. But for those of you who are joining, either lurking or in the future, hello. So I thought I would look at something that at least sounds fairly informational. But I also have a question, because I have listened to many speakers in the past regarding asylum seekers. And this is one of the rare instances where I took a look at the capsule of the video, the description, before deciding to go with it. Our speaker is an immigration lawyer. So she's going to be giving us, as per the title at least, some tales of asylum seekers. Now, what is an asylum seeker? I figured we'd get a level set on the legal, or whoops, that's my phone going off because my father is texting me. Okay, well, let's deal with that while I'm doing this real quick. Yeah, let me know you got this, he said. Okay. I did it. Apologies, guys. Live TV. So what does an asylum seeker do, or what do they have to provide in order to, well, seek asylum? Every year, and then, by the way, this comes from the government website for immigration. I forget exactly the technical name. I think it's either ICE or something like that. Anyway, every year people come to the United States seeking protection because they have suffered persecution or fear that they will suffer persecution due to race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, political opinion. Now, I have to say that in this day and age in America, simply on Twitter, you could face persecution for these things. I don't think that necessarily means you get to run to another country, but there are obviously far more serious iterations of those things in different places in the world. You may only file this application if you are physically present in the United States and you are not a U.S. citizen. My father is setting up his new phone and wanted to make sure that his texting ability worked. That's me, resident guinea pig. At this time, the option to file an online form I-589 is only available for certain affirmative asylum applicants. Affirmative asylum applicants may not file an online form I-589 if they are in proceedings in immigration court before the Board of Immigration Appeals, are an unaccompanied alien child, should they be at Area 51 and are in removal proceedings, are among the categories of applicants who must currently file by mail with the Asylum Vetting Center as outlined in the Special Instructions section, blah, 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 already submitted a Form I-589, which is still pending with USCIS. So, in short, what happens is you, as the person seeking asylum, you come up to a port of entry or a border crossing station, and you say, I am here to apply for asylum. And then, generally speaking, you will be housed somewhere along the border, usually in one of the cities on the border or elsewise. Although recently, many people have been bused or planed or shipped to other places in the country, either because they're overrun with as far as space is concerned on the border, or they're using it for political purposes, to make a point, to send a message, to burden other people. It's all very complicated. And then your application goes through the immigration court, and they have to, analyze your claim, see if they can verify it, see if your claim of asylum is legitimate. And then if it is, you may be given a temporary or, depending on the situation, long-term residency or pathway to citizenship, or you could be rejected and be deported. It all depends on how it goes. That's the simplified version, and I'm not a lawyer. But of course, with so many people coming to the border in the last year alone, something upwards of 2 million people or something in the last 6 months, I think it is. The system is overloaded. The COVID restrictions sent people back to Mexico rather than having them wait in America for their applications to be processed. It's all very complicated. Why am I giving you all this information ahead of time? Well, because I'm curious to know how our speaker approaches the subject. Because on several occasions, I've listened to immigration lawyers defending asylum seekers, wherein the reasons for their asylum seeking fall outside of the requirements and lean more into economic desperation, or I should say, grouping in legitimate asylum seekers with people who entered the country illegally. These are different things. These are different demographics. And I'm kind of curious to see what kind of stories our speaker gives us, what kind of explanation she provides, and what her legal interpretation of things ends up being as we go. So that's all. I apologize for the long preamble. I wanted to explain why I chose this one and what I'm looking for. Okay? Or what I'm keeping my ears open for. Now then, all that out of the way, tonight's bingo card is bingo card A. A as in absence. Sure. Absconding. There's a good one. Links to the bingo cards are in the description. So keep your ears open for the terms and or concepts thereon. And a couple more hellos, and then we'll move on to the show. A2P, hello. Liesel7, hello. Tarai Deos, hello. Lurking Gopher, hello. Emperor WR Costin, hello. Meh, hello. All right. So all of that being said, let's move on to the TEDx Salt Lake City event, wherein we're going to hear about credible fear, stories of asylum seekers coming to the U.S. It clocks in just over 12 minutes. A couple seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed.
Thank you. Undocumented immigrants.
Okay. We're only 7 seconds in, and already I can get a whiff of where we're going in some of the terminology here. You guys hear that all right? 5 by 5. Undocumented immigrants. You mean illegal. We're already sugarcoating the reality of things, but okay, undocumented immigrants. Go on.
Refugees.
One is an illegal status. You have no documentation, you're here illegally. And another person, or another category, I should say, is someone who's like fleeing a natural disaster or a legitimate war zone or something like that, who have been affirmed as being refugees from an emergency or a crisis.
Asylum seekers.
That falls somewhere in the middle, depending on the justification, although most of those have to do with, as we said earlier, racial, political, religious persecution.
These are probably terms that you hear frequently when you watch TV, scroll through social media, or talk with your friends.
Could be.
And while they all relate to immigration, they have vastly different meanings.
Yes,
and
they
yet,
do.
People use them interchangeably.
It's true.
What is the difference between these three terms?
I kind of just went over it.
Well, an undocumented immigrant is a person who lives in a country without proper paperwork.
That is technically true, yes.
A refugee is a person who is forced to leave their home country to flee natural disasters, wars, or persecution.
That is also true.
An asylum seeker is much like a refugee, in that this individual is forced to flee their home country for safety. But unlike a refugee, an asylum seeker's claims have yet to be evaluated by the US government, and as such, they have not been granted the refugee status.
Right. They are seeking asylum. They are applying for asylum. It's going through a process. There is no guarantee that their seeking will be rewarded.
According to the Center for Immigration Studies, nearly 60,000 people sought asylum in the United States in 2021.
60,000? 60,000. Okay, how many, let's see, 2021 illegal border encounters. 1.7 million. So out of 1.7 million encounters, 60,000 made a legitimate claim for asylum. Okay. Are you going to mention that part of it?
Of the thousands of men, women, and children fleeing for their lives, only 14% were granted asylum in the United States.
I'm guessing because the other 86% were found to be unjustified or unverifiable in their claims.
So what now of the thousands? What now of the thousands that are left stateless or forced to return to their home country?
Them's the breaks.
I remember clearly the spring afternoon where I learned that a majority of these rejected asylum seekers were now either missing or dead.
Yeah. If you roll the dice, you take your chances traveling across foreign nations without any support.
They had met the fate from which they were trying to flee. And although the number of asylum seekers that I worked with on the US-Mexican border is small in comparison to these thousands, the news was still just as jarring. I think back to the women and children who I met with in the small, windowless, whitewashed interrogation room. I met the faces of mothers, sisters, abuelitas, children, and even babies.
Yeah, and those, especially the children, those are the individuals that I get most infuriated about when it comes to people trying to cross into the country illegally, first and foremost. But as well, just trying to cross up to the border at all, whether they're seeking asylum or trying to get in illegally. When you're taking children on a possibly thousands of miles of treacherous terrain amongst oftentimes shady individuals, smugglers or otherwise, and putting your small children at risk on the chance that you might make it into the country, first and foremost, or that you'll be able to somehow scale a wall or get across the Rio Grande without either drowning or falling and breaking your neck. Go through the proper channels. Don't put your lives at risk. Because here's the problem. There is a push-pull relationship in this problem. The push is you have all of these countries that are economically, civilly, politically, militarily terrible to try to live in and not nice places to be. So why would you want to stay there? And I'm not saying that the places people are moving from towards the United States are paradises at all, like they have no excuse or something. But then you have the pull part of it, which is the states, the counties, the cities in the United States that brand themselves as sanctuary territories, let's say. That say, as long as you can just get here, if you can just get to this city, if you can just get across the border, we'll protect you. We'll keep you safe from the federal government. We won't help the federal government find you. You have a safe haven here. You have sanctuary here. And so you have this promise of a relatively better life from where you're starting if you can just get across the border. And you have people by the millions throwing themselves, and most especially their children, into a potential meat grinder to achieve this goal. And what are we doing about it? Well, we send Kamala Harris down to, what was it? Where did we send her? Was it Ecuador or something? And she stood up on a podium and she said to the world, "Don't come here. Do not come." Like that's going to do anything. But at the same time, you have border agents and our border security personnel who are good people doing a job that is terrible. Because I like I said, I have family who have worked in border security, and I've heard the horror stories of coming across of abandoned children that have been sent alone to the border by their parents because they think they'll have a better chance of getting into the country if they're not with an adult. And what can we do? But, here's a child coming up to your doorstep alone. What do? Well, you have to take them in, but then you have to put them through the same process as everybody else. And then they get separated from their family or you have people coming to the border with children and we don't know if it's your child. You say it is. Do you have any documentation of that? Are you smuggling them? Did you kidnap them from their rightful guardians? But beyond all that, you also have the deaths. You have the people who have died in the desert on the way to the border, people who have drowned in the Rio Grande, people who have broken their backs or died trying to climb the walls into the country. You have the people that do make it across the border and end up suffocating to death inside of tractor trailers or overstuffing SUVs and then crashing when they're running away from the border patrol, and several people dying or being maimed. It's ridiculous. It's tragic and it's a waste. Right? So what do you do? I don't have an answer. If I did, I'd probably win the Nobel Peace Prize. But again, let's see what our speaker has to say about it.
I think back to the horrific stories that I heard in that detention center, often nicknamed the baby jail. Stories of fear, death, and persecution. A lot of the asylum seekers in the detention center didn't know where some of their family members were, as they had been separated from their husbands and sons at the border. And that was, in fact, one of the first questions that I always received was, do you know where my family is? And do you know if they are safe?
Well, that's... If you submit yourself to the border of a foreign nation, you're submitting yourself to their rules and procedures. And if the procedures we have in place to ensure that we don't have smugglers or kidnappers or abusers or traffickers means separating people and trying to vet everything, that's it. I'm not quite sure what a more reasonable way would be to handle these situations, because you have to balance, common humanity with pragmatism. If you are taking your family off to a foreign nation seeking asylum and you don't have the proper documentation, you didn't go through the right channels, you didn't do any prep work for it or anything else, you just kind of show up at the doorstep, you're putting yourself through a process. And your family. Remember, you chose to put your family through this, especially your children.
I did not know. It was in those moments that I wanted nothing more than to wrap my arms around them. But it was forbidden.
Yeah.
The most I could do was shake their hand and promise to help them as much as I could.
Okay.
I think back to one moment where a young toddler, sobbing, tired, hungry from the long day, wrapped her arms around my leg.
Mm-hmm.
It broke my mama heart to throw my hands up in the air and reassure the security guards that I was in no way comforting or consoling this crying child.
You're not allowed to comfort or console. I don't know. I mean, if you have a no contact order or something inside of the detention centers or the border security centers, I don't know, but okay. I can assume it's probably fairly strict because they have to deal with contraband and God knows what else.
It felt shameful. It felt inhuman.
It's pragmatic and it's necessary. You must understand this.
And even though I entered that detention center knowing all of the relevant case law and all of the legal jargon, I had to ask myself, am I really being an advocate for these people?
Well, okay, how much physical contact does a lawyer have with their clients in any other circumstance when it comes to a detention center? Right? Or where security is paramount, or you have to see to the safety of people. I mean, whether they're victims or not, whether they're children or not. I mean, and again, the only reason is because their parents brought them along.
I remember all of my clients perfectly.
Really?
But one
Okay.
that stands out to me is Rosa, whose name and identifying details have been changed. Rosa
Okay.
and I had very similar personalities, and we started our initial meeting by talking about my pink painted nails. It felt a little strange to be talking about something so trivial as a manicure in such a dire situation.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it was so natural for us to have something to connect over.
Yeah. Admittedly, I'm not a lawyer. I've never had to deal with, or like a social worker or something like that. Maybe it's just my cynicism. I would probably do my best not to get too personally involved with my clients. I'd stick to the rules, do my best on their behalf, and try to keep some professional distance. I understand that can't be easy to do, but I would at least try to make it somewhat of a practice. You got to insulate yourself somehow from these situations, right? But okay, pink fingernails.
To bond over.
Yeah.
In our native Spanish, Rosa told me the story of an abusive boyfriend who was part of an international gang.
Mm-hmm.
Because Rosa knew so much about the gang, she was asked to join. And when she said no, her and her boyfriend broke up, and the gang began to target her. Rosa fled from city to city, only further angering this gang, and soon their threats turned to more than just words. They beat her. Fearing for the life of her children, Rosa fled by bus to the US-Mexican border with nothing but a backpack and her kids.
Okay. And so I'm assuming that she had no other avenues to seek out, no shelters, the police. I mean, I don't know. She said Mexico? Well, she didn't say what the originating country was. It's just that they both spoke Spanish. Okay, so her only option was to pack up her kids and make the gamble of traveling to the U.S.-Mexico border. See, I wonder if somebody in this country was being harassed and or stalked by a gang, let's say, would they be able to go to Canada and make a claim for asylum? Would they be able to go to Germany and make a claim for asylum? Would any other country, on the basis of that story alone, call that a qualifier for asylum or residency in their country? And I'm asking that sincerely. I don't know. I don't know what Canada would do. I don't know what Germany would do. But I'm just trying to think of something other than someone coming to the U.S. and someone going from the U.S. somewhere else. So, all right. I'm assuming that Rosa's story is going to end up being one that does not go well. But let's take a second to look at the bingo card. Collectivize his own demographic. I mean, she talked about both she and Rosa speaking Spanish, but that's not really a demographic thing. This is not yet. Systemic institutional, yes, the immigration system and so on. If it hasn't been explicitly brought up yet, it is being mentioned. Sales pitch for product or service. She hasn't said, my lawyering abilities are for sale or something. Childhood or family anecdote. I might be willing to extend that to the family stories she tells as she goes if she doesn't mention her own family, but I'm going to wait a bit. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not yet, no. Plays victim. She hasn't played victim. No. Microaggressions, unconscious bias. Not yet. Privilege. Not yet. Contradicts own point or argument. Not quite sure what her argument is yet. Patriarchy. No. Weightless example. Not yet. Wage gap, no. Feminism, no. Marginalized marginalization. It's implied. I don't know if she said the word yet, but we'll probably get there. A list. She hasn't given us an official list yet. Let's wait and see. White supremacy, no. Word salad, not yet. Self-vilification or wretchedness, no. Argumentative non sequitur, not yet. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase, no. Mind reading assumes motives. I'm going to give it a bit more time. Benevolent condescension, maybe. We'll wait. Anecdote that probably never happened. Difficult to say. Like, as far as I can tell from the title, this entire talk is going to be nothing but anecdotes, so I guess we'll have to take them on a case by case. Lastly, leaves out vital context. Yeah, 60,000 asylum seekers, but leaving out how many other contacts there were at the border in comparison, and so on. She talked about undocumented refugees. Give a fuller picture of the situation at the border. Now, if she brings it up, if she does bring up the amount of contacts made at the border or encounters and so on, okay. But she was just bringing up those that applied for asylum and not how many people are actually flooding the border that aren't applying for asylum, which I find a little disingenuous. But so far on the board, I've got systemic, institutional, free space, and leaves out vital context. Let's keep going.
When she arrived at the border, she was met with this relief, thinking that she was finally safe.
Yeah, well, that is a mistake often made, isn't it?
But that relief was only met with further disappointment when she learned that she would have to wait on the border for an unknown period of time.
Yeah, well, if she had done some research ahead of making the trip, she would have known that.
After many days of waiting in the hot sun, Rosa was taken to a preliminary detention center, sorted, awakened in the middle of the night, and taken to an unmarked van, where she was driven in the dark to the asylum-seeking detention center, surrounded by barbed wire fences and security guards.
Again, all of this information could have been available to her if she had done some research ahead of making the trip with her children.
As mentioned earlier, an asylum seeker is like a refugee.
Why didn't she seek asylum in Mexico? I mean, I don't think she's mentioned what country of origin we're talking about here. Or if she did, it's already slipped my mind. Why seek asylum in the United States? Why not seek asylum in Mexico? Or was she... Did she mention that she was a Mexican citizen, Rosa? Or I may have missed it, or she may not have said.
But their claims have yet to be evaluated by the U.S. government.
Yeah.
The U.S. evaluates these claims by conducting what is known as a credible fear interview, and it's exactly what it sounds like. An individual sits across from an immigration officer, and that officer proceeds to then ask her a series of questions to determine if the fear for her life is credible or not.
Yes, that is about as good as it's going to get, isn't it? Does she have evidence? What is her story? Can her story be verified, etc.? She is asking for permission to take up residency in a foreign nation without, as you said, without anything other than a backpack and her kids. So, yeah, you have to make your case. This is the process. We have the laws in place where people can seek asylum. But if you're not coming directly from a nation that is under an emergency or a war zone or something, yeah, the burden is on you.
Note that passing this interview, known as a positive determination, does not yet mean that you've been granted asylum.
Nope.
Rather, it means that you can now start the long and expensive process of seeking asylum in the United States.
This is why you should check before you come to the door. None of this information is secret. The procedures and the process is entirely documented online and elsewhere. None of this is a mystery to anybody who is preparing themselves for the experience, let's say.
Depending on the jurisdiction, less than 15% of people will ever pass their credible fear interview, and even fewer will be granted asylum.
The standards are high. It's true. You having a problem in your country does not equate to it's serious enough to seek asylum in another nation. Because again, if I was being stalked by a gang in the United States, would Canada think that that was a good enough reason to allow me to live in their country? Or Germany? Or Mexico? I mean, my instincts tell me probably not. But I don't know. You're the lawyer, you tell us. Unless you're just sort of sugarcoating the entire pragmatism and necessity of the strictures to the process.
As noted by Track Immigration Research.
Okay.
Ultimately, it will be a judge who, after hearing their case, will make the final decision.
Yes.
Which brings me back to Rosa. After sharing the details of her horrific story with a Customs and Border Patrol officer, it was determined that the fear Rosa had for her life and for the life of her children was not credible.
Okay. So either she was making up parts or entireties of her story, and or she had no evidence to show that she was under serious threat. So you're a lawyer. If someone lacks evidence in a case, in order to meet the burden to either the judge or the law in proving your case, what do you think should happen? I guess the overarching question will be here, what is our speaker suggesting be done in the alternative?
And she was promptly deported.
Yes.
I don't know what happened to Rosa.
So you don't know if what she was saying was actually true either. Okay.
But I do now know what we as community members can do to help asylum seekers like her.
As community members. Okay, again, someone comes to your door without invitation, without prompting, has absolutely nothing to show to back up their story. What do you do with this person as compared to someone who, say, comes to the border and says, here's the bullet hole I suffered when I was shot by the militia in XYZ country in this incident. Here's my documentation showing I live in that area at the time that this happened, da-da-da-da-da-da. Who has the more credible story? Who has the more credible claim of asylum? She came to you with a story. You didn't say that she showed pictures. You didn't say that she showed video evidence or documents or anything else that backed up her claim. Yeah, the law can be a very cold and calculating process, but that's part of its utility. You're a lawyer. You should understand this.
We start first by educating and empowering ourselves with the knowledge. We learn the differences between the asylum process and traditional immigration processes.
Yeah, no, I understand, at least on a high level, the asylum process. There is a burden of proof on the person seeking asylum. They have to prove their case. You're making a claim to a foreign nation that you are under such dire circumstances that they should let you in and live in your country. If Rosa had any what's the word I'm looking for? Initiative, I should say. There's a good word. Initiative before making the trip with her children. He didn't say what happened to her children, by the way. With her children to the border, she would have some idea of what would be required of her, what she would have to do, what kind of evidence she'd have to come up with. But she didn't. She had a story. And it sounds like with nothing to back it up. What is the community supposed to do? Educate ourselves on what? If I educate myself on X, but then some stranger shows up with a story and nothing else, what does my extra knowledge have to do with helping them, more verify their story? What do you mean?
Now, don't get me wrong. We need to continue talking about traditional immigration processes.
Such as?
I myself come from an immigrant mother whose story should be shared, who should be amplified.
Oh, so maybe you're a little biased on this situation? Okay, given your background and given the fact that you're making these very emotional personal connections with your clients, are you sure you can maintain some level of objectivity in these things?
But the process for obtaining asylum is far different than those who enter this country, whether it be through a family visa or perhaps through employment. And so it is too difficult for us to compare.
Whoa. Hold on. Back up a little bit here.
Obtaining asylum is far different than those who enter this country, whether it be through a family visa or perhaps through employment. And so it is too difficult for us to compare.
No, it's not difficult to compare at all. Someone has a legitimate cause to enter this country. If they have a family visa, they have a family visa. If they have a work visa, they have a work visa. They have someone in the country already who is backing them up and vouching for them in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a family member or their employer. In my company, I watched, at least from the sidelines several years ago, as my boss worked to have a coworker of mine who was in Vietnam come to work and live in the United States. And I watched from the sidelines and I heard the stories, the Byzantine, labyrinthine nature of the immigration process just to get this guy into the country to do work. There was nothing nefarious about it. It was all completely above board, but despite the fact that they did all the paperwork stuff correctly, and he had all his documentation, and he had all of his visa requirements set up and everything, it took months and months and months to get the guy over here because of, some fiasco here, or somebody had a miscommunication there, or some expiration date passed and the government flubbed something. Yeah, but you see, there is a legitimate process. You can compare these things because they are drastically different from one another. One is a methodical series of processes and paperwork that already exist and have someone in the country who's backing up and vouching for someone. And the other one is somebody showing up unannounced at the doorstep and asking to be let in. What are you talking about?
The first way you can start is by talking to your local representatives. I know immigration law is so complex, and sometimes it feels overwhelming trying to learn and keep up with all of it.
Okay, let's say I learn immigration law just as a hobby. What does that do for Rosa? What does my knowing about immigration law do for Rosa, other than inform me in a more detailed way why she was rejected and deported? What is that going to change?
Talking to your local representatives is a good way to start.
Which local representatives? Are you talking about like my elected representatives? What do you mean representatives?
Don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions, like why are there so many people in need who are being turned away at the border?
Because we have a very high bar you have to jump in order to qualify for asylum. Because if we just open up the floodgates, we'd have 2+ million people flooding into the country without any verification. Perhaps they're being trafficked. Perhaps they're criminals escaping the law in their home country. What else would you want? What are you offering in alternative to this?
And what policies are you advocating for that would make it safer for asylum seekers?
Okay, what would you advocate for? What changes would you make? Okay, I admit I am not an expert in immigration law or procedure. Okay, everything I know is quote unquote academic, high level news article, or what I can get off of official websites as far as like forms and figures and things. That's about it. Okay, I'm a complete layman. You're the expert, you're the professional. What would you change? If you had a magic wand, what would you do? How would you alter the process for asylum seekers today to, at least from your perspective, improve things? Okay, you've laid out the problem, or at least given us one sad story reflecting what you think the problem is. What is your solution? Because educating everybody on immigration law is probably just going to come back to say, that's why she was deported. How is that going to improve things for Rosa? What would educating the community on these subjects do to have allowed Rosa to come into the country and stay? Assassin of the Great, thank you so much. Stranger comes to my house, tries to force the front door, tries to force the back door, tries to force the basement door, breaks window to climb in, gets shot dead equals I am the bad guy. Well, let's hope that get shot dead thing doesn't happen to anybody, but yeah, if we're talking about illegal immigrants and they get them, I mean, again, if you're a grown adult and you make the decision to put your life at risk, Darwin Award territory, right? As desperate as you are, if you put yourself in a situation where you're going to be smuggled in the back of a tractor trailer, it's the difference between, feeling that somebody has made a very, very poor decision in life and you are setting yourself up for something bad to happen, and the honest tragedy of someone losing their life over something so pointless. And that's just one thing as compared to the innocent children that are forced into these same situations against their will, against their knowledge, in the custody of someone who purportedly is there to take care of them. It's such a frustrating thing. It is so frustrating to think about just how many people have gotten themselves either killed or horribly maimed or something. Like I read an article not too long ago about the people trying to climb over the wall into California or Texas, and they're falling and breaking their backs, and being paralyzed or dying. Like there was one about a pregnant woman who jumped over the fence and she fell and died, and both she and the child died. Terrible, terrible wastes of life. Whatever I might think about their methods or everything else. Anyway, sorry, not to try to get too dour on this, but again, I ask, at least in absentia, to our speaker, what are you offering as an alternative?
Similarly, our state representatives play an important role in helping asylum seekers after they have been admitted into the United States.
Well, if they've been admitted into the United States, if they passed all their tests and their claims have been found to have legitimacy, yeah, there is a system and an apparatus set up to help them as much as is possible. But we're not talking about people who have made their cases. You're talking about Rosa, who was turned away. So when are we going to get back to what you would do differently to help Rosa or people in a situation similar to Rosa?
You can ask the same questions. What are we doing to make our communities a safer place for asylum seekers?
Well, I don't know. What aren't we doing to make our communities safe for asylum seekers? What would you suggest be done?
And how do we help those who have just arrived in this country fleeing persecution?
Okay, how do we currently help them? And if it's not enough, what do you suggest we do in addition?
The ultimate solution is to support and advocate for policies that are aimed at helping people.
Such as?
Now that we have empowered ourselves with knowledge.
What, just now? What? Well, I must have missed that part. I'm empowered with knowledge? I mean, I'm empowered with your rhetoric. I don't feel like I've learned a whole heck of a lot so far. But Okay, now that we've been empowered with knowledge, even though you've given us no specifics on what policies are in place or what you would do to change them, or what infrastructure is in place to help people who have been accepted into this country under asylum seeking, or how you change it or make it better. Okay, now that we're empowered,
we can take the time to listen.
Oh, okay.
I left that detention center with a deep connection to the stories that I had heard.
I think that might be part of your problem. Again, there is a real utility to having some professional distance in situations like this, especially when you're dealing with the legal process. Okay.
As a lawyer, I've learned how to promote and encourage men, women, and children to share their stories with others. I've taught those in our community how they can create a space for asylum seekers to share their journey.
Okay, what does any of that have to do with the asylum seeking process? You know, if you were using Rosa as an example of here's what asylum seekers need to do when coming to this country. You know, Rosa made these mistakes, or Rosa did not have this evidence. And so I would implore asylum seekers, if you're coming to this country and seeking asylum, that you have these tips at hand before you reach the border. Because that would be, I would think, the message you'd want to get across in this situation. That whatever the truth is behind Rosa's story, she obviously showed up without being ill-equipped for what she was getting into. Right? So if you were trying to send a message out to potential asylum seekers as to do this, do this, do this, do this to improve your chances of having your claim of asylum be accepted, you'd have my attention. I'd be right there with you. But so far you haven't done that. And you haven't given us any specificity as to what you want to have happen or what needs to be changed, just that the community needs to be educated to help asylum seekers. Okay, how?
And the best part is, you can do this too. That is how we educate our community. That is how we amplify the voices of the vulnerable.
Listening to stories? I sit there and listen to someone's story of how they came across the desert or why they escaped their country of origin and da-da-da-da-da. And then what? What happens? How is that changing something?
According to the Utah Department of Health and Human Services, in their Office of Refugee Resettlement, there are roughly 60,000 refugees in Utah alone, many of who were once asylum seekers.
Okay, so they came to the border in whatever circumstance, and they applied for asylum, and they were accepted, and they went through the legitimate process, and are now living, I guess, in Utah. What does that have to do with Rosa?
This number continues to grow every year.
Yeah, I can imagine so. If we've got 1.7 to 2 million people coming to the border, most of them illegally, yeah, I'm sure it does grow.
Asylum seekers shop at your grocery stores. They live in your neighborhoods. Their children go to school with your children.
I don't care. If they're in the country legitimately, they went through the procedures and they were accepted under law and policy, so what? Not my problem. Welcome to the country. I hope you have a better time of it for however long you're here, because maybe you're only here temporarily because, you know, the situation in your home country is hopefully temporary as well, and you have temporary protected status. Or maybe you're here for the long run. Either way, you're here illegally and you went through the procedures under law. Great. Welcome to the neighborhood. So what?
Create a space for them.
What they did. They're living in Utah. You don't think there's enough space in Utah? Have you been to Utah? What? And what am I supposed to do? If I see someone at the grocery store who looks mildly Latino, am I to assume that they're here under an asylum-seeking situation? Am I supposed to interrogate everybody to find out their immigration status? What are you talking about? What are you asking of me as a proverbial Utah citizen?
where they can share their life and their story without fear of judgment, bias, or deportation.
Well, hey, they're not going to be deported if they're in the country legally. All right, if they're here under a legitimate asylum claim, they're not going to be deported. They went through that process. Unless they do something to break the law or otherwise violate the terms of their asylum status, they're not going to be deported. Secondly, again, what do you want me to do? Interrogate people? Check them for their story? Most times I just leave well enough alone. I leave people alone until I have some reason to bother them. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm old-fashioned like that. Where am I supposed to go to hear these stories? You know, under what circumstances am I supposed to learn about someone's immigration story or assume to know that they have one? I need an active example. I know, it's one of my favorite phrases only because I end up asking it every single time. I need an active example of what you're talking about. And then I need you to explain to me how listening to the story of some random person I encounter apparently at the grocery store at the elementary school is then going to help people like Rosa.
Create a space and take the initiative to learn of their story rather than make assumptions.
What? How am I supposed to learn of their story if I'm not making assumptions about where they came from by essentially racially profiling them? Under what circumstances am I listening to someone's story? I mean, if I went to a community workshop or something, right, or a local meet and greet or town hall or something where it's like, listen to the stories of asylum seekers. Okay, well, at least then I know that if I'm sitting in the audience and the people say, I come from XYZ country and I came here and I'm an asylum seeker, or I'm no longer seeking asylum, I now have asylum. Okay, that makes sense. But under what other circumstances would I do that? What are you talking about? Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. Papers and autobiographies, please. Yeah, I know, it's like, tell me your life story, person I think isn't from this country because you look vaguely Latino or something. What are you advising people to do? How is this supposed to work? And what does this have to do with Rosa's situation? That was your example. That was your premier example. I would think that the following information from that would address whatever problems you saw in that example. We're not there yet, and we've only got about 2.5 minutes.
On how they got here.
I assume they got here by coming to the border and seeking asylum. What? Maybe it's none of my business. You ever think about that? Maybe it's none of my business.
Now that we have learned, and now that we have listened.
Oh, for crying out loud. Learned what? Listened to what?
We must now speak.
About?
We must denounce hateful rhetoric and language from our communities.
No. Welcome to the United States. First Amendment applies. Short of threats of physical violence or something else, if you don't like someone's attitude or language on a subject, walk away, change the channel, block them on social media, the end. I don't know what to tell you otherwise, okay? There are always going to be racists. There's always going to be xenophobes. It's not going to change. Now, education certainly may change those things. And by gum, as Grandpa used to say, do you think things are as bad now as they were 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 60 years ago? Things are changing. What does this have to do with Rosa? What does language policing do that would have changed Rosa's circumstances?
We must call out our friends and family who refer to human beings as illegal.
Well, why don't you call out the law? What did I read at the top of the show? The legal language, right? Illegal. Yeah, if you are an illegal immigrant, you did not immigrate here legally. You might want to sugarcoat the language. It doesn't change anything. Undocumented. Does it make you feel better to say undocumented? Okay, well, you know what? It means the same thing. Someone is in the country illegally. It doesn't mean that they are an illegal person, like they're somehow non-human. That's what you want it to mean. That's not what it means. You're the one pushing that as something that it is not.
We must call out friends and family who refer to an influx of immigrants as an invasion, or who find it easier to blame immigrants for their woes.
If 2 million people attempt to cross the border in the course of less than a year, what would you call that under any other circumstance? What is the definition of an invasion? Let's see. Definition of invasion. Now, I don't want the TV series. Definition of invasion. An incursion by a large number of people or things into a place or sphere of activity. Dictionary definition. You are a lawyer. You deal in technical terms all the time. Illegal. Invasion. These terms apply.
Remember, there are people in our community who are silently listening to you.
And they are here legally in the examples you've given. And if they're here illegally, they are criminals. And they're not supposed to be here. You're a lawyer. Are you on the side of the law or not? Well, I'm going to hurt their feelings? Oh, no. Oh, no.
They're silently listening to what you say and what you don't.
Well, what I say and what I don't. Oh, well, what am I required to say to make them feel better? I mean, granted that now we are obviously being told to interrogate people, presumably on the basis of their aesthetic, as to their country of origin and their immigration status, so I can learn their story, that somehow that will help Rosa, who had no evidence of her hardship to prove to the immigration court. You've got very little time left.
There are those in our community who are silently listening to what you post on social media.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. I don't know if you know this, but if they are in this country, admittedly, whether they're here legally or illegally, they still have the right of free speech. So they can respond. If they choose to be silent, well, that's their choice as well. That's their prerogative. They can also argue. They can debate. They can counterpoint. Have you been on Twitter? Happens all the time, whether you know what you're talking about or not. I should know, because I'm an idiot a lot of times. But hey, welcome to the wonderful world. So I have to watch what I say on the off chance that someone somewhere silently is feeling bad. Okay. Would you like to extend that same sense of logic to anything else in this country? What would you require of the people in this country to or not say or do or think on the off chance that someone somewhere is silently feeling bad about it? Is that the standard that you're aiming for here? Are you actually a lawyer who's here to defend the Constitution of the United States and the laws therein, or not?
We must denounce all hateful rhetoric, and we must denounce those who spread xenophobia under the guise of just saying it how it is.
Okay, who's going to define hateful rhetoric? Who's going to police that? What would you require of people who commit hateful rhetoric? What consequences would you install? Xenophobic. Okay, well, if someone's xenophobic, what punishment would you lay on them? I'm just asking. You know, it's one of those things of living in a free society, in a society that has its foundation on the freedom of speech. You are going to hear things oftentimes that you don't agree with. You're going to hear things oftentimes that you vehemently disagree with. You may hear disgusting things people say. things that you would never condone in your entire life. But short of being a crime in and of itself, like a death threat or something, or a bomb threat, people have the ability to say what they want, and you have the ability to ignore them. What does this have to do with Rosa's situation? What would policing people's language or expressions of themselves or their opinions have to do with Rosa's situation? It was your example.
No.
No?
Being blunt in your bullying is not a badge of honor.
Oh, okay. Well, please tell me what qualifies as bullying and what qualifies as just, as you say, stating it as it is. Like, I don't know, the law. Oh, wow. So you guys are applauding tone policing. You're applauding language policing. You're applauding restricting people's ability to express themselves, even if they happen to say something you don't like. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's also your prerogative in this country. Good luck trying to make it happen for sure, although sometimes on different social media platforms, it all depends.
We help asylum seekers by taking the time to learn the difference between the asylum process, the refugee process, and traditional immigration processes.
What does that have to do with Rosa's situation? I understand, at least from a 30,000-foot level, the nuances between those three categories of immigration procedure: asylum, refugee, and standard normal immigration. Okay? I get it. Doesn't make Rosa's story any more credible to the court, does it?
We recognize that categorizing individual circumstances is unfair.
No, it is not. It is not unfair. It is necessary. If my individual circumstances, I can't find a job in my country, I'm going to come to yours, versus I am escaping a natural disaster that decimated my homeland and I have nowhere else to go. These are two distinctly different circumstances, deserving of two distinctly different assessments. You're a lawyer. There are degrees of criminality. We're not supposed to assess people on their individual circumstances? What the? Okay. You know what? That one there, given our speaker's pedigree, given everything else,
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
This is why we have laws. This is why we have lawyers. This is why we have judges, to assess the information being provided and doling out a conclusion based on the circumstances. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to every circumstance. Are you nuts? What? And still, we have not been given any clear details on what she would change or how any of this would have somehow changed the fortunes of Rosa. Her premier and so far only detailed example of a asylum seeker story.
To the individual. And when you hear people...
I cut her off, obviously. I didn't... You pause too long. I think that it's an end of a sentence or a thought.
By taking the time to learn the difference between the asylum process, the refugee process, and traditional immigration processes. We recognize that categorizing individual circumstances is unfair to the individual.
No, it is not.
And when you hear people who categorize such large groups of people together, ask yourself, what is actually being said here?
Oh, I hear it all the time. I hear someone saying, speaking as a, fill in the blank with your demographic. What is being said there? You're saying that an entire demographic is a monolith. And you need to apply one standard of assessment to people instead of looking at everyone's individual circumstances. So what are you asking for?
You don't have to go to law school to help asylum seekers.
Okay, what would I do?
You don't have to go work on the border.
Okay, what would I do?
You help asylum seekers by learning.
Learning what?
You help asylum seekers by listening and
I have listened to you. I kept listening and waiting for some details, for an argument, for what you would do differently or have done differently to help Rosa. You've offered nothing, and I've been listening very carefully to this.
You don't have to go work on the border. You help asylum seekers by learning. You help asylum seekers by listening and creating a space for them to share their stories. You do so by denouncing hateful rhetoric and speech in our communities.
No. I'm sorry. No. I don't police people's language. Again, short of a crime being committed or a threat being made. Okay? Something called like a credible threat, sort of like what Rosa had to like put up when she was applying for asylum. No, I'm not going to pretend to be a protector of people's feelings. And also, you still haven't given us any information on how we're supposed to determine who to listen to. How am I supposed to tell whether someone's an asylum seeker or not if I'm just walking down the street or I see someone in a grocery store? Make a space for them? What do you mean make a space for them? Am I supposed to offer up my home? Is there some what's the word I'm looking for? Is it deficit? That's the word I'm looking for. Is there some deficit of housing for asylum seekers in Utah that the people of Utah should be, I don't know, putting their homes forward? Is that a failing of the current immigration or asylum system? If so, why aren't you telling us that? Right? I mean, is there a program where you can billet an asylum seeker or someone here under the asylum laws? I mean, is that a possibility? Is that a program in place? Or are you suggesting such a thing? What are you talking about?
Ultimately, if you want to help, you create a community that is safe for asylum seekers, and even more importantly, a place where they feel wanted.
What business is it of mine? I mean, unless I have evidence that someone is in the country illegally, what business is it of mine to start interrogating, investigating, inquiring of other people's backgrounds, histories, points of origin, and elsewise in the course of my daily business? What? You've given us no details. You've offered us no specific advice. You've given us absolutely no arguments for policies to be either altered, changed, deleted, whatever. And Rosa is still somewhere out in the ether, and nothing apparently would have been possible in changing her circumstance. Or else I'm sure you would have told us, right? Or offered it, or imagined it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay, well, that was a heck of a lot less informative than I thought it would be. I mean, like I said at the top, this is one of those instances where I was curious to know what is the perspective from the other side of the situation, or someone who is a practicing expert on the subject. Immigration law? Okay, an immigration lawyer. Who else could I go to find out, at least from one perspective, what's going on the ground on the side of people attempting to come into this country? There you go. What did I get? What did we get? Nothing. 12 minutes, uninterrupted, no restrictions on what she had to say. And what was offered to us? Oh, call people out for saying mean things, or whatever you interpret to be mean things. Don't classify a crime as an illegal action, and don't classify a massive influx of people into this country unbidden as an invasion. That's what we got. So guys, don't use the word illegal, and don't call what's happening an invasion. And that will change what exactly? That will improve the circumstances of Rosa. How? I don't know. So, all that being said, let's move on to the bingo card, which I did, admittedly, neglect over the course of the thing because I was so enthralled and waiting for some details that there's probably several squares to be circled and probably several that you guys were screaming at me from the chat to pay attention to. So let's go into that now. This is the bingo card as it currently sits. And see, I did circle it for the WTF already. All right. Collectivizes own demographic. She didn't do that. Aside from mentioning that she and Rosa spoke Spanish, native Spanish, she never, her mother, that's an iffy one. That's an iffy one. She said that her mother was an immigrant, was a child of an immigrant. Own demographic, though. I'm going to leave it blank for now. If you guys have a good pitch, elsewise, let's come back to it. Sales pitch for product or service. I wish she'd said, like, here's my pamphlet on how to help asylum seekers, and here's page 1, and here's the table of contents. That would have been more detail than anything else she actually said. Childhood or family anecdote. I'm going to circle this one just because most of her stories and little tidbits did deal with families and or, in one case, a child. So, and she was using that as part of her argument in such a way. So I'm going to circle that one. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. She was arguing for inclusion, make a space, welcome people in, that kind of thing. It's a little on the outside, but I think it makes sense. Plays victim. She didn't play the victim, and I'm hesitant to extend it to Rosa because she wasn't the speaker. And really, the bingo thing is to focus mostly on what the speaker says or says about themselves for the most part, or uses in their... I could see an argument for it, but I'm going to leave it blank for now. If you guys have arguments for squares to be circled, hold on to them. Unconscious bias, microaggressions. Yeah, hers. And apparently the kind of unconscious bias I'm supposed to possess in finding out people's backgrounds or backstories or something. Privilege. She didn't use the word that I know of, did she? I don't think so. I'm going to leave it there. Contradicts own point or argument. Well, was it a contradiction that she never gave us any information? Yeah, I mean, Rosa was her argument. Okay, that is the thing. She introduced the story of Rosa as an example of the problem. And then she spent the rest of the talk not addressing what she saw as the problem in any detailed way or any specificity. So, yeah, she did not succeed and wasted time in addressing the very thing that she was bringing up. Patriarchy. She didn't bring up gender stuff at all, men, women, or otherwise. She talked about families. She didn't really go into any kind of gender wars or anything, something like that. Weightless example. Well, yeah, Rosa was a weightless example. You brought her up and her situation, and it went nowhere. It did nothing it didn't help your argument, whatever your argument was. Wage gap. She did talk about the expense of the process for seeking asylum. She didn't lean into that too much. Just bringing up economics alone does not necessarily equate to a wage gap being circled, so I'm not sure on that one. Feminism again, marginalization. Yeah, because again, she was talking about people silently listening and watching and hearing what you have to say, and then make a space for them. And they go to your same schools and they go to your grocery stores. Yeah, so circling that one. A list. Did she give us a list? Well, I mean, technically she did. No, wait. Did she go over the possible credible reasons for seeking asylum? Yeah, she talked about persecute. Yeah, I believe she did. I think she went over similarly a rough list is what I went over at the top. So I'm going to tentatively circle that one. If I'm wrong on that, somebody can correct me. White supremacy. She never really got in a race. So now, word salad. I mean, I understood what she was saying. The WTF was for something that just was something that was ridiculous to say, but I understood it. It wasn't just babble. I didn't feel like she ever went completely babble on it. Scrib just want to say, keep questioning for us. Okay. I will question for you on your behalf. Right? Yes? I don't know. Question for yourself. I represent no one but myself. Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's see. Where was I? Self-vilification or wretchedness. No, I never got that notion from her. I never heard her say that she was part of the problem or that she had to do X, Y, Z to improve whatever. So no. Argumentative non sequitur. I mean, it's usually not the case that I feel like I can justify double dipping on something, but again, the story of Rosa. She brings it up like it's really important, and she never revisits it or never links anything that she's been saying back to how it addresses Rosa's circumstance. I think that counts. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase. I didn't hear anything new out of that. Mind reading assumes motives. Yes, someone saying the word illegal or categorizing what's happening at the border as an invasion as being evil or hateful instead of just describing reality. It all depends on context. It all depends on individual circumstance, which we're not allowed to assess people on, said the lawyer. Let's see, benevolent condescension. Yes. You can make a space. You can do this. You can get into people's lives. You need to listen. And again, what? Look at anyone who happens to seem Latino to me that they might be not here. They weren't born here, so I need to ask them about how they came to this country, as if that's my business. Talking to us like, oh, you can't use hateful language. Oh, well, what's hateful? Who's going to police that? You, me? Who would you feel comfortable with policing your language? Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Joe Biden? Anecdote that probably never happened. Okay, this is a tough one because nothing that she told us, either about the kid grabbing her legs or talking to Rosa about pink fingernails or any of this other stuff, none of it sounded disingenuous. Right? None of it sounded too good to be true or anything. So I don't have any reason to think she was making up her stories. Let's put it that way. Her stories didn't pay off in the course of the presentation, but I don't think she was being dishonest. So yeah, I think that's where I'm at. So that's the card as I have it. No bingos yet, but there's the possibility. Outside possibility, but I need some good arguments because some of these squares I don't think line up. But you tell me if you've got an argument for a square to be circled, please put it in the chat now. Be sure to tag me in your comment. Makes it easier for me to see. So first off, we have Keeverdam. Oh, and by the way, before I get to Keeverdam's comment, please send your gaze to the top of the chat box for the GoFundMe links provided by Keeverdam. Thank you. To our friend Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and his kitten. If you have a couple of bucks to spare, they, their friends, and their family could certainly use your help. So thank you so much for that ahead of time. Keeverdam says, Scribelight, I left that detention center with a deep connection to those stories. Equals plays victim by proxy since she seemed to try to relate to them. Oh, yeah. Victim as advocate or vice versa. Okay. Now, you know what? Given the tempo of the presentation, I agree. Good one, Keeverdam. All right. Plays victim is circled. Anybody got anything else for me? Let me know. Mr. E, anecdote that didn't happen. Rosa, if she was real, she would have made more of an impact. No, there was enough detail there to make me think that it was real, and it was an incomplete story. Like, she didn't know what happened to Rosa, that kind of thing. I don't have any reason to think that her story about Rosa, in general terms, was a legitimate one. In the context of the presentation, it served no purpose, but I don't think she was making it up. Okay, that's where I'm kind of sitting. I don't think there's much wiggle room there in my mind, because she didn't give so many details that made it sound too perfect, and then everybody clapped. And, she was deported. Also, she never mentioned the kids again. She mentioned that she packed up her kids and left, but she never brought up the children again. So I assume the children went back with Rosa, I guess. I don't know. Let's see. Assassin of the Gray. Rosa is a talking point. She does not exist other than pity points. Again, there's not enough there for me to make me feel like it's false. It was weightless. It was a non sequitur to the rest of the presentation, but I don't have any reason to think it's false. It might be false, but there wasn't enough there for me to think that it was wholly made up entirely. I don't think you're going to be able to talk me down from that one, guys. I don't think there was enough there for me to make that kind of decision. Let's see. Mr. E, again, collectivizes his own demographic. I believe her mother was an illegal immigrant. If she was legal, she would have said so. The demographic is foreign and she said she was the child of an immigrant. She didn't give any qualification one way or the other. And I'm hesitant to extend that to her mother and then to the speaker, because that doesn't make her part of that same demographic. So, no, I don't think so. Again, I know I'm being picky here, but there's a standard, and I just want to make sure I hold everyone to it is all. Let's see. Oh, Mike R. The story of absolutely no consoling anyone ever, anecdote that probably never happened. I have seen documentaries on prisons and places that highly restrict physical contact with people within those places. And they're monitored for contraband, for anything untoward, for physical violence, etc. I can believe that she was under very strict instructions regarding personal contact with the people in the detention center. I can believe that. Okay, I'm not trying to be a complete rain cloud here, but I'm just trying to keep it honest. Jose Chacon, someone mentioned a list when describing different types of people, illegal, legal, asylum. That's also true. That's also true. Okay, so there you go. There's a list. That's true. She gave us a list of the different types of people seeking entry into the country. Okay. Let's see. Oh, BG. What are you saying? Most talk scribes have bad speakers, but yeah, she was well under even that low bar. Insofar as providing an informative or even a sidewise informative presentation, yeah, this was pretty poor. This is pretty empty. You kept waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, okay, now she's going to say, this policy does X. Instead, it should be changed to Y, or this policy needs to go because of ABC. I thought for sure we'd get something like that, because she would get like into the nitty gritty. As a immigration lawyer, she has to deal with these processes all the time. I can believe that there are places within the process that need streamlining or reform. Like I said, just on the sidelines, I watched as a coworker of mine went through ridiculous hoops to come to the country legitimately under a work visa. So I can believe that under the asylum process, there are places that are broken or need reform or are, superfluous to the entire thing. I don't know. That's the thing. That's what I was waiting to hear, because I don't know. I would assume she does, but she didn't tell us. And so what was the point of the presentation? To ask people to watch their language. Don't talk to someone in that tone of voice. That's what she was. That was the point by the end of it. Had nothing to do with this happened to Rosa, and this is unfair, in my opinion. I think that the policy should be blah, blah, blah. And then Rosa would have had a fair shake. That's what I was expecting. Why front load your presentation with Rosa's story if that is not going to be the crux and the example by which you're going to then relay to us what you want to have happen? So, taking a step back from the subject matter at hand, the presentation was just a very, very poorly constructed one. Let's see, who else is here? Yvonne Solomon, this TED Talk is a great educational tool on how not to write a speech. Isn't that what we come across over and over again on this show? It's like the simple rules of writing an essay would do so much to help so many of these presentations, right? You give your thesis statement. You give your body where you're backing up your thesis statement. You conclude by restating the thesis statement with mentions and echoes back to the examples you gave in the body. It's a very simple structure, you know. I mean, your proposal, your information, and your conclusion might still be complete nonsense and not link one to another, but you can at least structure it in that way. But, you know, this is what I expect. Let's see. Assassin the Gray again. Oh, or allow yourself to be emotionally manipulated into allowing your country to be destroyed. Well, just like, you know, everybody, like, democracy is under threat. Like, some hyperbole I just might get behind, but, you know, whatever. All depends. Yvonne, word salad. Her point was policing language because it hurts people's feelings, but she never mentioned how Rosa was hurt by those words. Is that word salad or just a poor argument? Because you see, word salad to me is I hear somebody talk and all I hear is a string of buzzwords disconnected from one another or just gobbledygook. You know, I mean, oftentimes instinctually when I hear a word salad in my mind and oftentimes out loud, I just go like that. I never found myself doing that over the course of the presentation. Again, she said a whole bunch of things that were disjointed one to another and making a point, but I don't know if that's word salad. Because I understood what she was saying. Not sure. I mean, if you can give me an example, if you can give me an active example. Let's see. Mystery, self-vilification, she failed Rosa. Did she dwell on that, though? Again, she didn't come back to Rosa at all, or her role in it. Or, like, if she had said something like, after that situation, I realized I should have done this. Or maybe even something like, if I had been provided these tools under the law, maybe I could have changed Rosa's fate. If she'd done something like that and then given examples of what she would have needed under the law, I could see that. But she deported Rosa from her own presentation. As quickly as she mentioned it, Rosa was gone, off the table. Uh-oh. Scribe is too jaded for TED Talks now. Am I? I might be. I might be too picky. That's probably it. I'm just too picky now. I set the bar so high over the course of this series for different squares to be circled. I require a little bit more, both of myself and of you. All right, Mr. E has two here: privilege and wage gap. If you are seeking asylum from a place for economic reasons, and you think you have the right to go to any nation you want, you don't. That's privilege. And for economy reasons. Okay, well, her primary example was Rosa, who wasn't coming because of economic situation, but because of a threat by gangs. So that, again, I have to work with what was in the presentation. And she didn't dwell on the economic forces pushing people to this country. So if it wasn't in the talk, I can't really do that. And as far as like thinking of the right to do it, well, that's the thing. Asylum seekers do have the right. They have the right under the law. They have the right under the law to seek asylum. They're not guaranteed asylum, but they can seek it. It's not a privilege. It is a right under the law, even to people who are coming to this country, obviously from another country. So I'm sorry, Mr. E. I know you're trying. I appreciate it. Assassin the Grave. Gang violence is not grounds for asylum. Well, obviously so, because she wasn't allowed in. So, yeah. Anything else? Oh, here we go. Mike R. Patriarchy, the story of Rosa's boyfriend oppressing her. It's a stretch. Yeah, no, I know I'm being such a stickler here, but for a bingo square especially, patriarchy was not a theme of this talk. It was not brought up. She wasn't talking about the oppression of men or how men are in charge of everything. If she said something like, the entire border security workforce I dealt with at the detention center was all made up of white men or something, then maybe. But she didn't. Mr. E, they do not have the right to select a nation. Well, it's not a right, they can. But we have laws in place to allow for asylum seekers. So seeking asylum in this country is a right. They can't skip over nations. Well, they do. They often do. I mean, in a perfect world, you would think that might be an obstacle, but it's not. So, yeah, I know you're trying. I appreciate it. But unless somebody's got another argument, I think we are at the end of the road on this one, guys. Not quite a bingo anywhere. She was very focused on one particular train of thought, didn't really go in a whole lot of places, and honestly didn't use a whole lot of examples. She gave us one premier example, never revisited it, and thereafter gave us no real details on what she would do in the alternative. We've seen this before in TED Talks. But you don't know till you listen, and I was listening. I was listening very carefully. I wanted to learn something. I didn't learn anything. So enhancing my knowledge and listening for new information, I did my best. I hope, in the abstract of things, if our speaker were listening to me, listen to her, she'd understand I really did want to hear something substantive. Right there. But with that, everyone, I'm going to call it here. If you'd like to hear more from me, by the way, you can find me here Sunday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern for the Sunday stream, at which time I will do a show about a thing. Not sure what it'll be yet. It may be my border digest for this month. We'll see. I might do something different since this TEDx talk dealt with the border. Thank you, Mike R., for the Bravo Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox. Which Dogcat Fox shall I do today? Oh, I was on the AAA stream the other day, so how about Sonata?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I've been popping up on different places the last couple of days. I was on the AAA stream. What was it? I think on Monday? I think it was. And then on Tuesday, I was on Monkey's channel for the election stream. I've been all over the place. Yeah. So everyone, again, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved, even in our disagreements, that you have very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the GoFundMe's pinned to the top of the chat box, thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. For those of you that have tomorrow off for Veterans Day, have a good day off. For those of you out there who are veterans or have a family member who's a veteran, again, I know it sounds cliche, but I truly do mean it. Thank you so much for your service and your sacrifice. It is appreciated more than you know. It allows me and you, and thankfully everybody, for the most part, to say what they want to do and live as they want to live. At least until we're told otherwise by mandates and other things. But hey, that's all in the past now. That'll never happen again. Everybody, have a good rest of your Thursday. Have a good rest of your evening. Have a good weekend. I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.